My name is Emily Carter. I was 32 years old when I learned that my father had secretly changed his entire life for me. Not because I had asked him to, not because I had earned it, and certainly not because he wanted to make me rich. He did it because, in his heart, he believed he had already lost enough. My mother had died when I was 17, and after she died, my father remarried. That marriage changed our family forever. For years, I thought my father simply didn't like the person I had become. I thought he was disappointed in me. I thought maybe he blamed me for reminding him too much of my mother. But I was wrong. There was something my father had never told me, a secret he carried for 15 years. And when I finally discovered it, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie. But before I tell you what happened, you need to understand where this story began. It began with my mother. Her name was Sarah. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, packed extra food for guests, and somehow knew when someone was hurting even if they smiled. My father, Daniel, was different. He wasn't very expressive. He didn't say, "I love you" every 5 minutes. He showed love through actions. If my bicycle chain broke, he fixed it. If I had an exam, he stayed awake until I finished studying. If I was sick, he slept in the chair beside my bed. And whenever Mom and I argued, Dad would usually look at me and say, "Give your mother 10 minutes, then go apologize." Even when I knew I wasn't wrong, our house wasn't rich, but it was comfortable. My father owned a small construction company outside Chicago. It started with almost nothing: one old truck, 2 employees, and a garage that my mother jokingly called Dad's second bedroom. Over the years, the company grew. By the time I was 16, my father had several crews working across the city. But money never changed him. He still wore the same old watch. He still drank coffee from the same cracked mug. And every Sunday morning, he made pancakes for Mom and me. Those mornings were my favorite. Until one Sunday, everything changed. Mom didn't come downstairs. At first, we thought she was sleeping. Dad went upstairs. A minute later, I heard him shout my name. "Emily!" I ran upstairs. My mother was lying on the bedroom floor. Her eyes were closed. Dad was holding her hand. I remember the ambulance. I remember the flashing lights. I remember standing outside the hospital with my father while he stared at the emergency room doors. And I remember him whispering, "Please don't take her. She never came home. My mother died from an unexpected heart condition." There was no goodbye, no final conversation, no last dinner, nothing, just an empty chair at the kitchen table. For months, Dad barely spoke. I tried to take care of him. He tried to take care of me, but we were both grieving badly. I stopped talking about Mom because every time I did, Dad looked like someone had stabbed him. Dad stopped talking about Mom because he couldn't survive the conversation. We learned to live around the silence. Then, about a year after Mom's death, Dad met someone. Her name was Linda. She was friendly, confident, beautiful, and at first I genuinely wanted to like her. My father deserved happiness. I told myself that, but Linda never seemed comfortable around me. She was polite when Dad was watching, cold when he wasn't. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and heard her talking to my father. "You can't keep living in the past, Daniel." Dad didn't answer. She continued, "Emily is almost an adult. She needs to understand that you have a life too." I stood behind the hallway wall, listening. Dad finally said, "She's my daughter." Linda sighed. "I'm not asking you to abandon her." There was a pause. "I'm asking you to stop treating her like she's still 12. I walked away before they saw me. I didn't tell Dad I'd heard them. A few months later, they got married. I moved into a college dorm. That was when my relationship with Dad began to change. He called less, visited less. And whenever I came home, Linda made it clear that I was no longer the center of his world. One Thanksgiving, I arrived home early. Linda was sitting at the dining table with a stack of papers. She looked at me. "You're staying here tonight?" I smiled. "Of course, it's Thanksgiving." She looked uncomfortable. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Your father has expenses now, Emily." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" She folded the papers. "It means you're old enough to start paying for some things yourself." I stared at her. I have a scholarship. I know. Then what expenses are you talking about? She didn't answer. Dad walked in. He saw my face. What happened? I looked at Linda, then at him. Nothing. I went upstairs. That night, Dad knocked on my bedroom door. He sat beside me. I'm sorry. I asked him, do you love her more than me? He looked shocked. Never. Then why does everything feel different? He looked down. Because I don't know how to be a father and a husband at the same time. I cried. He hugged me. And for a moment, everything felt normal again. But it didn't last. Over the next few years, Linda slowly pushed me farther away. She convinced Dad that I was irresponsible, that I depended on him too much, that I wasn't grateful. Whenever Dad helped me financially, Linda complained. Whenever Dad invited me home, Linda found a reason to be upset. Eventually, I stopped asking for anything. I graduated. I got a job. I rented a small apartment, and I learned to survive without my father. Then something strange happened. My father started visiting me secretly. Not literally secretly, but he would call and say, "Are you home?" I'd say yes. 10 minutes later, he'd be outside my apartment. Sometimes he'd bring groceries. Sometimes he'd bring Mom's old recipes. Sometimes he'd just sit on my couch and drink coffee. One evening, I asked him, "Why don't you come when Linda is here?" His face changed. "I don't want to argue." "Does she know you're here?" He looked away. "Don't worry about that." I knew something was wrong, but I didn't push. Years passed. I built my own life. I got married, then divorced. My father was there for me through the divorce. Linda wasn't. She told Dad, maybe Emily should learn to make better choices. That sentence destroyed something inside me. I stopped visiting. For almost 2 years, I barely spoke to my father. Then one Tuesday morning, I received a phone call. It was my father's lawyer. His name was Michael Harris. He asked me to come to his office. I thought something had happened to Dad. I asked, "Is my father okay?" There was a long pause. "He is alive." My heart sank. "Then why do you need me there?" "I think you should come." I arrived at his office that afternoon. Michael stood when I entered. He looked serious. He gestured toward a chair. "Emily, I need you to sit down." I sat. He placed a folder on the desk. "This concerns your father." I opened it. The first document was a property deed. My name was on it. I looked at Michael. "What is this?" "Your father transferred ownership of the family house to you." I laughed nervously. "What? The house, Emily?" He slid another document toward me, then another. My father's construction company, several investment accounts, a commercial property, a piece of land. I stared at the papers. "This can't be right." "It is." "Why?" Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "When was the last time you spoke to your father?" 3 weeks ago. Did he tell you anything unusual?" "No," Michael leaned back. "Your father has been planning this for years." I couldn't breathe. "Planning what?" He looked directly into my eyes. "Leaving almost everything he owns to you." I stared at him. "But why?" Michael's expression changed. "That's something your father wanted to explain himself." I stood. "Where is he?" "He asked you to come to the hospital." My heart stopped. "Hospital?" Michael nodded. "He's very sick." I rushed there. When I entered my father's room, he was lying in bed. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, fragile. I sat beside him. He opened his eyes. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. "My little girl." I started crying. He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't." "I'm sorry I let you think I didn't love you." I squeezed his hand. "Why did you leave everything to me?" He closed his eyes. "Because your mother wanted it that way." I froze. "What?" Dad opened his eyes. "Your mother knew she was sick." I stared at him. "But the doctors said it was sudden." He shook his head slowly. "Not completely." My heart began racing. "What are you saying?" He looked toward the window. "Your mother knew she didn't have much time." I couldn't speak. "She made me promise something." "What?" "That I would protect you." "I don't understand." He took a breath. "And there is one more thing." I leaned closer. Dad whispered, "Linda knows about it." I froze. "What does Linda know?" My father looked frightened. For the first time in my entire life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. He said, She knows the truth about your mother. And then he closed his eyes. I thought he had fainted, but he whispered one final sentence. Emily, don't trust the woman you think destroyed our family. I stared at him. Who? He didn't answer. His heart monitor began to beat faster. Doctors rushed into the room. I was forced into the hallway. And as the hospital doors closed behind them, I realized something terrifying. Maybe my mother hadn't simply died. Maybe my father hadn't simply remarried. Maybe Linda hadn't simply pushed me away. Maybe there had been a secret connecting all three events. And my father had just given me the first piece of it. The worst part? He had left me everything. But now I was beginning to wonder whether everything he owned was actually a gift or evidence. The hospital doors closed in front of me. For the next 43 minutes, I didn't know whether my father was alive. I sat alone in the hallway, staring at the floor. My father's words kept repeating inside my head. Don't trust the woman you think destroyed our family. Who was he talking about? Linda or someone else? When the doctor finally came out, I stood so quickly that my chair fell behind me. Is my father okay? The doctor removed his mask. He's stable for now. I nearly collapsed with relief. Can I see him? In a few minutes. I nodded. Then I remembered Michael, my father's lawyer. I called him. Michael, you need to come back. What happened? My father told me something about Mom. There was silence. Then Michael asked quietly, what exactly did he say? I told him. When I finished, Michael didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, he said, Emily, there are things your father asked me never to tell you unless he was no longer able to explain them himself. My stomach tightened. What things? I'll come to the hospital. 20 minutes later, Michael walked into the waiting room carrying the same brown folder. He sat beside me. I looked at him. Tell me everything. He opened the folder. Your father began preparing your inheritance almost 8 years ago. 8 years? Yes. Why? He told me he wanted to make sure you would never be financially dependent on anyone. I swallowed. Because of Linda. Michael looked at me, partly. What's the other part? He pulled out a letter. This was written by your mother. I stared at the envelope. My mother's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in 15 years. My hands started shaking. Where did you get this? Your father gave it to me 3 years ago. Why didn't you give it to me? Because he told me your mother specifically instructed him not to. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The first line nearly broke me. My dearest Emily, I couldn't continue. I wiped my eyes. Michael said, take your time. I read the letter. My mother wrote about me, about my childhood, about how proud she was. But then the letter changed. She wrote that she had discovered something about her health. She had been experiencing unusual symptoms for months. She had seen specialists, and one doctor had warned her that her condition could become dangerous. But the doctor had also told her that treatment might give her more time. My mother had chosen not to tell me. She didn't want my final memories of her to be filled with fear. Then came the part that shocked me. She wrote about my father. Daniel will blame himself. Please don't let him. I stopped reading. My father had blamed himself all these years. But why? I continued. If something happens to me, Daniel will try to protect you. He will probably become overprotective. Please understand that his fear will come from love. My eyes filled with tears. Then I reached the final paragraph. There is another person you must be careful around. I cannot write the name here because I don't know who may eventually read this letter. But Daniel knows. I looked at Michael. Who was she talking about? Michael shook his head. I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. Then why does my father say Linda knows? Michael looked uncomfortable. Because Linda was not the person your father married immediately after your mother died. I froze. What? Linda came later. I stared at him. I thought Linda was the woman he married after Mom. She was his second wife. Then who was the first? Michael didn't answer. I suddenly remembered something. A woman, a name I had almost forgot. When I was 18, shortly after my father remarried, I once found an old photograph in a drawer. My father had been standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. I had asked him who she was. He took the photograph from my hand. Nobody. At the time I didn't understand, now I did. Michael, I whispered. Who was my father's first wife? He looked at me. Her name was Rebecca. The name meant nothing. Where is she? Dead. My heart stopped. Dead? Yes. How? Michael looked down. Car accident. I stared at him. Was it before or after Mom? After. I couldn't understand. My mother died. Then Dad married someone else. Then that woman died. Then Linda appeared, 3 women, 1 man, and a secret connecting them. I went back into my father's hospital room. He was awake. I sat beside him. Dad, he looked at me. Who is Rebecca? His face changed immediately. I had my answer before he spoke. You know her. He closed his eyes. I knew you would eventually find out. Tell me. He looked exhausted. Rebecca was your mother's closest friend. I felt dizzy. My mother's friend? He nodded. Why did you marry her? I didn't. What? Rebecca and I never married. I looked at him. Michael said she was your first wife. She wasn't. Then why does everyone think she was? Dad sighed. Because that's the story Linda wanted people to believe. I stood. What does Linda have to do with Rebecca? Dad didn't answer. Dad, he finally looked at me. Your mother trusted Rebecca. Why? Because Rebecca knew something. What? He stared at the ceiling. That your mother wasn't dying from a natural illness. The room seemed to disappear around me. What are you saying? Dad grabbed my hand. Emily, listen carefully. I leaned closer. Your mother's heart condition was real, but the medication she was taking was not what she thought it was. I couldn't breathe. What? Someone had been giving her something that made her condition worse. I pulled my hand away. Who? We never proved it. But you suspected someone, he nodded. Yes. Who? Dad looked at the door. Then whispered, Linda. My entire body went cold. I couldn't speak. Dad continued. But suspicion isn't proof. Then why did you marry her? I didn't know everything when I met her. You knew she might have harmed Mom? I didn't know. You just said you suspected her. After your mother died? I shook my head. Why would you marry someone you suspected? I didn't know she was the same person. What do you mean? Dad closed his eyes. Linda wasn't her real name. I stepped backward. What? He nodded. Her real name was Linda Miller. So? Your mother knew her by another name. What name? Dad whispered, Laura Bennett. I felt like the floor had disappeared. Why would she change her name? Because she had a past. What kind of past? Dad didn't answer. The heart monitor beside him began beeping faster. He was getting tired. I sat beside him. Please, Dad. He looked at me. I need to know. He squeezed my hand. Your mother discovered that Laura had been involved with someone who wanted access to our business. Who? An investor. What investor? Thomas Reed. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. My father had mentioned him once. Years ago, a man who tried to buy half of Dad's company. Dad refused. Thomas disappeared from our lives, or so I thought. Where is he now? Dad looked at Michael. Michael answered. Dead. I stared at him. Everyone connected to my mother's death is dead? Michael didn't respond. My father closed his eyes. I thought he was falling asleep. Then he said something that changed everything. Your mother didn't leave you money? I frowned. What? She left you information. What information? The inheritance isn't the important part. I looked at Michael. What is? Michael opened the brown folder again. He removed a small flash drive. This. I stared at it. What is that? Your mother recorded something before she died. My heart began pounding. A video? Audio. Where is it? Your father kept it hidden for 15 years. Why? Because he was afraid. Of Linda? Michael nodded. Of Linda and of someone else. I took the flash drive. Who? Michael looked at me. The person who helped your mother. I frowned. Who helped her? He whispered. Your mother had a private investigator. My stomach tightened. Who? Rebecca. Everything suddenly made sense. Rebecca hadn't been my father's wife. She had been my mother's investigator. And somehow, after my mother died, Rebecca had become connected to my father. Then she died in a car accident. And Linda appeared. I looked at my father's sleeping face. For 15 years, I had believed my father chose another woman over me. Now I realized he may have been trying to protect me from her. But one question remained. If Linda had something to do with my mother's death, why had my father stayed married to her? I left the hospital with Michael. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about the flash drive. When I reached my apartment, I locked the door. Then I connected it to my laptop. There was one audio file. No title, no date, just numbers. I pressed play. Static filled the room. Then I heard a woman's voice, my mother's voice. I hadn't heard it in 15 years. Daniel, if you're hearing this, something happened. I covered my mouth. Her voice continued. I need you to listen carefully. There was a pause. I don't know who I can trust anymore. My tears began falling. Then my mother said a sentence that made my entire body freeze. Linda is not the person you think she is. I stopped breathing. The recording continued. She didn't enter our lives by accident. Then there was a loud noise. My mother's voice became quieter. I found out who sent her. The audio suddenly became distorted. Then I heard one final sentence. Daniel, the person behind all of this is someone you already know. The recording ended. I stared at the screen. Someone I already knew. Someone close enough to my family to enter our lives. Someone who had a reason to destroy my mother. Then my phone rang. It was my father. I answered immediately. Dad, but it wasn't my father. It was a woman's voice. Linda. She said only 5 words. Stop digging into your mother's death. Then she hung up. I sat completely still, because Linda had no reason to know I had the recording, unless she had been listening too. And suddenly, I realized something even more frightening. My father hadn't left everything to me because he simply loved me. He had left everything to me because he knew that once the truth came out, I might lose everything anyway. And he wanted to make sure I had something left to stand on. Linda's voice stayed in my head all night. Stop digging into your mother's death. I replayed those 5 words again and again. She hadn't asked what I was doing. She hadn't asked why I was investigating. She hadn't even pretended to be confused. She knew. Somehow, she knew exactly what I had discovered. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. My father had spent 15 years protecting me. If he was finally willing to reveal the truth, I needed to be smarter than my anger. I called Michael. He answered on the second ring. Emily? Linda called me. There was silence. What did she say? I repeated her words. Michael sighed. Then your father was right. About what? She's scared. I looked out my window. Scared people make mistakes. Exactly. I asked him to meet me. An hour later, we sat in a quiet coffee shop. I placed the flash drive on the table. I want to know everything. Michael nodded. Then I'll tell you what I know. He leaned closer. Your mother hired Rebecca Bennett about 4 months before she died. Why? Your mother believed someone was watching your family. Watching us. She noticed strange financial activity around your father's company. I frowned. What kind? Small transfers, fake invoices, payments to companies that didn't exist. Who was doing it? Your mother didn't know. That's why she hired Rebecca? Yes. I looked at the flash drive. And Rebecca discovered Linda? Michael shook his head. Not immediately. Then what did she discover? Thomas Reed. I remembered the name. The investor. Yes. Was he stealing from my father? That's what your mother suspected. I leaned back. How much money? At least $2 million. I couldn't believe it. 2 million? Possibly more. And Dad never noticed? Your father trusted the wrong people. Who? Michael hesitated. His accountant. I stared at him. Who was his accountant? David Miller. My heart stopped. Miller? Michael nodded. Yes. I suddenly remembered Linda's last name, Linda Miller. Was David Miller related to Linda? Michael looked at me. Her father. I felt sick. My father had unknowingly allowed the family of the people stealing from his company into his life. Where is David now? Dead. How? Heart attack. I laughed bitterly. Of course. Michael looked serious. Emily, I know how this sounds. It sounds like everyone connected to my mother is dead. That's why we need evidence. I nodded. Where are your father's old company records? Most are archived. Can we access them? You're the owner now. I looked at him. What? Your father transferred ownership of the company to you. The weight of those words finally hit me. Everything was mine. The house, The company, the properties, the accounts, but I didn't feel rich. I felt hunted. That afternoon, Michael took me to my father's office. It had barely changed. His old desk, his photographs, Mom's picture still sitting beside the computer. I touched the frame. For 15 years, I had thought Dad kept Mom's photograph because he missed her. Now I wondered if it was also a reminder. Michael opened a filing cabinet. "We're looking for anything related to Thomas Reed, David Miller, or Rebecca Bennett." We searched for hours. Then I found a box hidden behind several old tax files. It had my mother's handwriting on it. "Daniel, do not destroy." I opened it. Inside were photographs, bank statements, receipts, and one handwritten note. "If something happens to me, check the lake house." I looked at Michael. "What's the lake house?" He stared at the note. "Your father never told me about this." "Where is it?" "Michigan." I remembered it immediately. Our family had a small lake house. Mom loved that place. Dad stopped taking me there after she died. I had always assumed it was because of memories. Now I wasn't sure. We drove there the next morning. The house looked abandoned. Dust covered the windows. The grass had grown high. I unlocked the door. Inside, everything smelled like old wood and cold air. I walked into the kitchen. Mom's old blue mug was still in the cabinet. I almost cried. Then I remembered the note. We searched every room. Nothing. Then I noticed something strange, the fireplace. One brick looked newer than the others. Michael pulled it loose. Behind it was a metal box. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a small notebook, 3 photographs, and a key. The notebook belonged to my mother. I opened it. The first pages were ordinary, doctors, appointments, family expenses. Then the entries became darker. "David is lying. Thomas is meeting someone. Rebecca says I'm in danger." Then, on one page, my mother had written, "I finally know who Linda is." I stopped. Michael leaned closer. I turned the page. There was only one sentence. "She was working for someone inside our family." I looked at Michael. "Inside our family?" He nodded slowly. Then I noticed the photographs. The first showed my mother standing outside a restaurant. The second showed Thomas Reed. The third showed Linda, but Linda wasn't alone. Standing beside her was my uncle, my father's younger brother, Richard. I stared at the photograph. "No," Michael took it from me. "That's Richard Carter, my uncle." Yes, I remembered Richard. He had always been distant. After Mom died, he disappeared from our lives. He didn't attend many family events. He moved to Arizona. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but the photograph was undeniable. Linda and Richard were standing together, and the date on the back was 3 months before my mother's death. My hands became cold. "Maybe it's innocent." Michael looked at the notebook. "Maybe." I opened another page. My mother's handwriting was shaky. "Richard knows about the money." Then another line. I confronted him, and beneath it, he threatened Daniel. I couldn't breathe. "My uncle threatened my father?" Michael nodded. "That's what this says." I kept reading. "I don't think Linda is acting alone." Then the final entry. The handwriting was almost unreadable. "If Daniel ever tells Emily the truth, they will come after her." I dropped the notebook. Michael stared at me. For 15 years, my father had kept silent. Not because he didn't trust me, because he was afraid someone would hurt me. I suddenly understood every strange decision, every distance, every time he told me not to ask questions, every time he visited me alone, every time Linda complained about me. Dad wasn't abandoning me. He was protecting me. But there was one thing I couldn't understand. If my uncle was involved, why had my father left everything to me? Michael seemed to read my mind. "There's something else." "What?" He reached into his briefcase. He pulled out another document. "Your father changed his will 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks? "Yes." "What changed?" Michael placed the document in front of me. "Your father added one condition." I read it. My inheritance would transfer completely to me only if I refused to sell the company for 5 years. I looked up. "Why?" Michael's answer was quiet. "Because someone has been trying to buy the company." "Who?" "An investment group." "Which one?" He gave me a name. "Carter Holdings." My heart stopped. "Carter?" Michael nodded. Richard's company? I stared at the document. My uncle wasn't just connected to the past. He was still trying to get my father's company. And now that Dad had transferred it to me, I was standing directly between him and millions of dollars. That evening, I returned to Chicago. When I reached my apartment, I noticed something strange. My front door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I entered slowly. Nothing looked stolen. My television was still there. My laptop, my jewelry, everything. Then I noticed the flash drive. It was gone. My blood ran cold. Someone had entered my apartment. But they hadn't come for money. They had come for the recording. I called Michael. Then I heard a noise from my bedroom. Someone was inside. I grabbed the nearest object I could find. A heavy lamp. Who's there? No answer. I walked toward the bedroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed it. Nobody, but on my bed was a single envelope. My name was written on it. Emily. I opened it. Inside was one photograph. It was a photograph of my mother. On the back were 6 words. Ask your father who killed Rebecca. My hands began shaking. I called Dad immediately. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Then Michael called me. Emily. His voice sounded different. What happened? Your father is gone. My heart stopped. What do you mean? He left the hospital. With whom? We don't know. Where is Linda? We can't find her either. I looked at the photograph in my hand. My mother, Rebecca, Linda, Richard, my father, all connected somehow. Then my phone received a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. There was only one sentence. Your father didn't leave you his fortune. He left you the truth. Another message arrived. And the truth will destroy your family. I stared at the screen. Then a third message appeared. Come to the old Carter warehouse alone. I knew that place. My father's first construction warehouse. The building had been closed for years. I should have called the police. I should have stayed home. But I needed to know where my father was, so I went. When I arrived, the warehouse was completely dark. I stepped inside. Dad? No answer. I walked farther. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. A man stepped out of the shadows. My Uncle Richard. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were exactly the same. He smiled. Hello, Emily. I froze. What did you do to my father? Richard shook his head. Your father is alive. Where is he? Safe. Then why am I here? He looked at me. Because your father finally told you too much. I took a step backward. What happened to my mother? Richard's smile disappeared. That's the question your father should have answered 15 years ago. Did you hurt her? He didn't answer. Did you? Richard looked away. Then he said, your mother discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. What? She discovered who was stealing from your father. David? He shook his head. David was only a small part of it. Thomas was an employee. I stared at him. Then who? Richard looked directly into my eyes. The person who planned everything was someone your mother trusted more than anyone. My heart pounded. Who? Richard smiled again. You're asking the wrong question. What should I ask? He stepped closer. You should ask why your father never told you the truth about the night your mother died. I felt the blood drain from my face. What happened that night? Richard whispered, your mother wasn't alone. Then the warehouse lights suddenly turned on. And standing at the far end of the building was my father, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Linda, and in her hand was the missing flash drive. My father looked at me. His face was full of fear. Then he said, Emily, don't believe anything Richard tells you. Richard laughed. Linda remained silent, and I realized I had walked into a trap, but I still didn't know which side was the trap and which side was the truth. For a few seconds, nobody moved. I stood in the middle of the warehouse, staring at my father. Linda stood beside him. Richard was behind me, and somehow I was trapped between the 3 people who knew the truth about my mother. My father looked exhausted. Emily, come here. I didn't move. Linda stepped forward. He's been trying to protect you. I looked at her. You broke into my apartment. She shook her head. No, you took the flash drive. No, then why do you have it? She looked at my father. Because he gave it to me. I stared at Dad. Why? My father lowered his head. Because I needed her help. I felt betrayed all over again. You trusted her. He nodded. Yes. After everything? Emily, you don't understand. Then explain it. My voice echoed through the warehouse. Explain why Mom died. Explain Rebecca. Explain Richard. Explain Linda. Explain why you gave me everything. Explain why you've spent 15 years lying to me. My father closed his eyes. Then he said, your mother was investigating your uncle. I looked at Richard. He didn't react. Dad continued. She discovered that Richard had been stealing from the company. Richard laughed. That's not the whole story. Dad looked at him. No, it isn't. I turned to Richard. What are you hiding? He didn't answer. My father stepped forward. Richard wasn't working alone. I looked at Linda. She was crying. That shocked me. I had never seen Linda cry, not once. My father looked at her. Tell her. Linda wiped her face. I didn't know what they were planning. Who? Your uncle and Thomas? I stared at her. What did they plan? Linda looked at my father. He nodded. She took a deep breath. Your mother discovered the financial fraud. She threatened to expose them. What happened? Thomas panicked. Richard interrupted. That's a lie. Linda turned toward him. You know it's not. Richard stepped forward. You were there. Linda's face went pale. I was there because I was trying to stop it. I couldn't understand. Stop what? Linda looked at me. The night your mother died. The warehouse suddenly felt silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. You were there? She nodded. Yes. I took a step toward her. Then tell me what happened. Linda looked at my father. He nodded. She began. Your mother had arranged to meet Richard and Thomas at the lake house. Why? She wanted to confront them. About the money? About everything. Linda swallowed. She had evidence. What evidence? Bank records, emails, contracts. Where are they? Your mother gave them to Rebecca. I remembered the notebook. That's why Rebecca was investigating. Yes. I looked at Richard. He said nothing. Linda continued. Your mother thought she could force them to confess. What happened? Richard and Thomas arrived first. And then, your mother came. Then, Linda's voice trembled. They argued. What did Richard do? I don't know. You're lying. No. You were there. I was outside. Then how do you know what happened? Linda looked at me. Because I heard your mother scream. My stomach turned. What happened next? Thomas ran outside. Why? Because your mother had fallen. I stopped breathing. She was already sick. Linda nodded. But something had happened. What? Her medication. I remembered my father's words. The medication wasn't what she thought it was. Linda nodded. Someone had switched it. I looked at Richard. He finally spoke. Nobody switched anything. My father shouted, Richard. Richard looked at him. You're still blaming me after all these years. Because you did it. Richard laughed. Then why didn't you go to the police? My father went silent. I looked at him. Dad. He couldn't answer. Richard smiled bitterly. Tell her. I looked between them. Tell me what? Richard pointed at my father. Tell her what you did. My father closed his eyes. I covered it up. My heart shattered. What? I covered it up. Why? Because I was afraid. Of Richard? Yes. That doesn't make sense. My father looked at me. Richard threatened you? I froze. Me. He told me that if I went to the police, you would be next. I couldn't speak. My father continued. I had already lost your mother. I couldn't risk losing you. I began crying. So you let him get away? Yes. How could you? I thought I was protecting you. You lied to me for 15 years. I know. You let me believe you didn't care about me. I know. You let me hate Linda. Linda looked down. She wanted you to hate her. I turned toward her. What? Linda's eyes filled with tears. Your father asked me to make you believe I was the villain. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why? Because Richard was watching you? I looked at my father. Explain. Dad nodded. After your mother's death, Richard continued monitoring you. Why? Because he believed you had the evidence. What evidence? The evidence your mother gave Rebecca. I remembered the box at the lake house. The notebook? Dad shook his head. No. Then what? Your mother's original files. Where are they? Dad looked at Richard. Richard's expression changed. That was when I understood. Richard still wanted them. My father said, Emily, your mother didn't leave you money. He paused. She left you proof. I looked at him. Where? He walked toward an old wooden desk. He opened a hidden compartment. Inside was a small metal key. He handed it to me. Your mother wanted you to have this. I stared at the key. What does it open? The safe. What safe? The one your mother rented under your name. I looked at Michael. Under my name? He nodded. Your mother created it before you were born. I couldn't understand. Why? Because she wanted something protected that nobody could connect to her. I took the key. Where is it? Michael answered. A private storage facility in Chicago. Richard suddenly moved. My father stepped in front of me. Don't. Richard stopped. Daniel, it's over. No, you can't protect her forever. I don't have to. My father looked at me. She can protect herself now. Richard stared at me, then he smiled. You really think the truth will save her? He turned and walked away. I watched him disappear into the darkness. I wanted to call the police, but my father stopped me. Not yet. Why? Because we need the evidence first. The next morning, Michael and I went to the storage facility. The safe was small, old, dusty. I inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside were several folders, a cassette tape, a photograph, and a letter addressed to me. I opened the letter. Emily, if you are reading this, then your father finally decided you were old enough to know the truth. I began crying before I finished the sentence. I want you to know something important. Your father did not fail me. He failed to save me, but he never stopped trying to save you. I looked at Michael. He was crying too. I continued. There is one person I trusted completely. That person helped me discover the truth. But if you are reading this, that person may no longer be alive. My hands shook. Rebecca. The letter continued. Rebecca found evidence that Richard and Thomas were stealing from your father. But she also discovered something worse. I turned the page. Thomas was not the person controlling the operation. My heart raced. Richard wasn't either. I stopped. Then who? I read the final line. The person behind everything was someone who had access to our family, our finances, and my medical records. I stared at the page. Michael whispered, Who? I turned the letter over. There was one final sentence written on the back. If you want the name, listen to the tape. We found an old cassette player. Michael inserted the tape. Static. Then my mother's voice. Rebecca, if you're hearing this. A second voice answered. It was Rebecca. I found the name. My mother's voice trembled. Who? Rebecca whispered. David Miller. I looked at Michael. Linda's father. My mother's voice asked. Are you sure? Yes. But he's dead. I know. Then how? Rebecca replied. Because someone is using his identity. The tape suddenly became distorted. Then Rebecca said one final sentence. The person using David Miller's identity is... The recording stopped. I stared at the machine. No. Michael rewound it. We listened again. The same result. The tape had been deliberately damaged. Someone didn't want us to hear the name. But there was something else. A faint sound in the background. Michael turned up the volume, a clock, ticking. Then a voice, not my mother's, not Rebecca's, a man's voice. He said, Linda, if they find out we're finished. I looked at Michael. That was Richard. He nodded. Then another voice answered, a woman's voice. Linda, I know. I felt sick. The recording proved Linda had known. But then Linda called me. I answered. Her voice was shaking. Emily, listen to me. What? I need to tell you something before your father does. What? I wasn't working for Richard. Then who? She was silent. Linda. Finally, she whispered, I was working for your mother. I froze. What? Your mother asked me to infiltrate Richard's operation. I couldn't speak. Linda continued. She knew she was dying. Why didn't she tell me? Because she wanted you protected. Then why did you treat me so badly? Because Richard was watching. I started crying. I hated you. I know. I thought you took my father away. Linda's voice broke. I was trying to keep you alive. Then she said something that made my heart stop. Emily, there's one thing your father doesn't know. What? Your mother wasn't killed because of the money. I waited. She was killed because she discovered who was using David Miller's identity. Who? Linda whispered. The person behind everything is still alive. I couldn't breathe. Who? She answered. Your father's business partner. Then the call disconnected. I immediately called Michael. But before I could speak, I heard a crash outside my apartment. Someone had broken the window. I ran toward it. On the street below, a black SUV was speeding away. And standing beside my door was my father. He looked terrified. "Emily, what happened?" He grabbed my shoulders. "Get your things." "Why?" "We have to leave." "Where?" He looked at me. "Because I finally know who betrayed your mother." I whispered, "Who?" My father looked toward the window. Then he said, "Someone I trusted more than my own brother." And in that moment, I realized the final secret was much closer to my family than I had ever imagined. My father stood in front of me, breathing heavily. His eyes were filled with something I had never seen before. Fear. Not the ordinary fear of losing money, not fear of losing his company. It was the fear of a man who had spent 15 years carrying a secret and suddenly realized there was nowhere left to hide. "Emily," he said quietly, "we need to leave." I shook my head. "No," he looked surprised. "I've spent my entire life being told not to ask questions. I'm done." "Emily, please." "Who betrayed Mom?" He closed his eyes. Then he whispered a name. "James." I stared at him. "James who?" "James Walker." I knew the name. Everyone in our family knew him. James had been my father's closest business partner for more than 20 years. He was at my parents' wedding. He attended my mother's funeral. He sent me flowers when I graduated. He even gave a speech at my college graduation. For years, I thought of him as family. "You think James killed Mom?" My father shook his head. "Not directly." "Then what did he do?" "He created the entire system." I couldn't speak. Dad continued. "James and Richard worked together. But Linda said she wasn't working for Richard." "She wasn't." "Then who was Linda working for?" "Your mother." I looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know the entire truth." "What do you mean?" My father sat down. "After your mother died, I thought Richard was responsible. I thought he had manipulated Thomas and David. But there was someone above them." "James," Dad nodded. "He used Richard because Richard wanted money. He used Thomas because Thomas wanted power. He used David because David had access to the company accounts." "And Mom found out." "Yes." "Then why didn't James kill her himself?" Dad looked at me. "Because he didn't need to." He paused. "He arranged for the medication to be switched." My stomach turned. "How?" "David had access to your mother's medical records. And Linda? Linda discovered the plan. That's why Mom recruited her." Dad nodded. "Your mother knew she was dying. She knew someone was trying to make it happen faster." I sat down. "Why didn't she go to the police?" "Because she didn't have enough evidence." "But she had Rebecca." "Rebecca was collecting it." "Then what happened to Rebecca?" My father looked down. "Rebecca got too close." My heart sank. "James killed her." "We believe so." "Believe? We never found enough evidence to prove it." I stared at my father. "You knew all this." "I suspected." "You suspected?" He nodded. "And you stayed silent." "I had one choice." "What?" "Protect you." I laughed through my tears. "You always say that." "Because it's true." "No, Dad, you protected me from the truth, but you didn't protect me from the pain." He looked at me. I continued. "I spent 15 years thinking you chose another woman over me." My father's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I thought Mom died and you replaced her." "I know. I thought you didn't want me anymore." He covered his face. "I know." And all this time, he looked at me. "I loved you every single day." That sentence broke me. I walked over and hugged him. For the first time in years, I felt like the little girl who used to sit beside him at the kitchen table. My father held me tightly. "I'm sorry." "I know. No, Emily, you don't." He pulled away. "There is one final thing you need to know." I wiped my tears. "What?" "Your mother knew she was going to die." I nodded. "She told me." "No," he shook his head. "She knew she might die, but she didn't know exactly when." I looked confused. "What are you saying?" "Your mother created the inheritance plan." "What?" "Not me." I stared at him. "Mom," he nodded. "Your mother instructed me to put everything in your name if she died." "Why?" "Because she didn't trust James." "But you had the company." "Not legally." I didn't understand. Dad explained. Your mother owned 40% of the company. I stared at him. I never knew that. Nobody did. Why? She kept it hidden. He handed me a document. I looked at it. My mother's signature was at the bottom. The document transferred her ownership into a trust. The beneficiary was me. I felt tears return. She did this before she died? Yes. She planned everything. She planned to protect you. I looked at the signature. My mother had been thinking about me while she was dying. She knew I would grow up without her. She knew my father might remarry. She knew people might try to take advantage of me, and she had left me something more valuable than money. She had left me a future. But there was still James. Where is he? My father looked at me. He knows we found out. Then we go to the police. We need evidence. We have the recordings. Not enough. The documents. Enough to start. I called Michael. He arrived within 30 minutes. We told him everything. For the first time, the entire story was assembled. The company records, my mother's notebook, Rebecca's investigation, the recordings, the financial transfers, the medical records, the photographs, and my father's testimony. Michael contacted federal investigators. Within days, the investigation began. James disappeared. Richard was arrested first. Then Thomas's old financial records were uncovered. David Miller's accounts were reopened. And investigators discovered something nobody expected. James had been using several false identities for years. One of them belonged to David Miller, the same identity mentioned in Rebecca's recording. The man who had been dead for years had apparently been making financial transactions. The evidence finally connected everything. James had created shell companies. He had used Richard to manipulate company contracts. He had used David's access to move money. He had used Thomas to intimidate people. And when my mother discovered the fraud, he tried to silence her. Linda's story was eventually confirmed. She had secretly worked with my mother. She had deliberately acted cold toward me because Richard was watching. She wanted Richard to believe I knew nothing. For years, I hated her. She had accepted my hatred because she believed it was safer for me. That realization changed me. One afternoon, I visited Linda. We sat across from each other. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." I looked at her. "I know. I wish your mother had never asked me to do it." "Why? Because you deserved a mother after you lost yours." I looked down. "You weren't my mother." She nodded. "I know. But you were trying to protect me." She began crying. "I promised Sarah." That was the first time she called my mother by her name. I reached across the table and held her hand. "I forgive you." She looked at me. "Why?" "Because I finally understand." My father's health continued to decline. The doctors said he needed serious treatment. He refused to discuss the inheritance. Every time I brought it up, he said, "It's yours." I told him I didn't care about the money. He smiled. "Your mother would be happy to hear that." A few months later, James was arrested. The case became public. News organizations reported the financial fraud and the mysterious chain of events surrounding my mother's death. But I didn't want publicity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. Richard eventually admitted his involvement. He had accepted money from James. He had helped hide financial records. But he denied knowing James intended to harm my mother. The courts would decide the rest. For me, the most important thing had already happened. I knew the truth. One evening, I sat with my father in the old family house. The same house where my mother once made pancakes. The same kitchen where I had once asked my father if he loved Linda more than me. Dad looked around. "Your mother loved this house." "I know. She wanted you to keep it." "I will." He smiled. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out my mother's old wedding ring. I stared at it. I thought this was lost. "No," he handed it to me. "Your mother asked me to give it to you when you were ready." I held it in my palm. Ready for what? To understand. I looked at him. He smiled. "She told me something before she died." "What?" "She said, Emily will think I left her." I began crying. Dad continued. "She said, tell her I never left, I just went somewhere she couldn't follow." I covered my mouth. For 15 years, I had carried anger toward my mother for dying. I knew that wasn't fair, but grief isn't always fair. Sometimes we blame the person we miss because blaming them is easier than accepting that life can take someone without permission. I looked at my father. Did she really say that? Every word. I hugged him. And for the first time since my mother's death, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My father lived another 3 years. During those years, we rebuilt our relationship. We had breakfast together every Sunday. We talked about Mom, we laughed about old memories, and sometimes we sat quietly without needing to say anything. He never remarried. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch, he looked at me. Emily. Yes. I want you to promise me something. What? Don't let what happened to us make you hate people. I smiled sadly. I won't. People hurt each other. I know, but that doesn't mean everyone is bad. I know. And money doesn't make a person rich. I looked at him. What does? He smiled. Who you have when you lose everything. A year later, my father passed away peacefully in his sleep. This time, there was a goodbye. I held his hand. I told him I loved him, and I told him Mom was waiting for him. After his funeral, I returned to the family house alone. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the cabinet, and there it was, my mother's old blue mug. I smiled. For years, I thought my father had left everything to me because he loved me more than anyone. But I finally understood. He hadn't given me money. He had given me protection. My mother had started it. My father had continued it. And even Linda, the woman I once hated, had sacrificed her reputation to protect me. The inheritance changed my life financially, but the truth changed me emotionally. I sold several properties. I kept the family house. I also created a small foundation in my mother's name. It helps families who lose a parent unexpectedly, because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to sit at a kitchen table and realize someone will never sit across from you again. I know what it feels like to think someone you love abandoned you. And I know what it feels like to discover years later that they were loving you in ways you couldn't see. Sometimes love doesn't look like flowers. Sometimes it looks like a father silently signing away everything he owns so his daughter will never have to depend on someone who might hurt her. Sometimes love looks like a woman allowing you to hate her because she promised your mother she would keep you alive. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the truth. The final letter my mother left me ended with one sentence. I keep it framed beside my desk. It says, Emily, if you ever wonder whether you were loved, look at everything we tried to protect for you. I used to think my father left everything to me because he felt guilty. Now I know the truth. He left it because my mother asked him to. He kept it because he loved me. And he waited 15 years to tell me because he believed the truth could put me in danger. Was he right to keep the secret? I don't know. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe I deserved to know sooner. But I've learned something about forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the past didn't hurt. It means accepting that sometimes people make terrible choices while trying to protect the people they love. My father made mistakes. My mother kept secrets. Linda lied to me. Richard betrayed our family. James destroyed lives for money. But in the end, the truth survived. And so did I. My name is Emily Carter. I thought I had inherited my father's fortune. But I was wrong. I inherited my mother's courage, my father's love, and the truth they both spent their lives trying to protect. And that was worth more than everything they left me.